My name is Maria, and I gave birth to my son on the floor of a public bathroom in Skid Row, alone. I'm telling you this because maybe if I say it out loud, it'll stop playing in my head every time I close my eyes. Maybe, but probably not. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Nothing ever is, right? But for me, it really wasn't. I didn't have a plan, not a real one. I had a kind of a hoping to get lucky plan. That's the best I could do. See, I was living on the street, had been for about 8 months at that point. Lost my job at the diner, then the room I was renting. One thing leads to another, and then you're sleeping with one eye open on a piece of cardboard. You know how it goes. Or maybe you don't. Lucky you. I found out I was pregnant in one of those free clinic vans. The nurse, she was nice. She asked me about prenatal care, about vitamins, about where I was staying. I just nodded, said, "Yes, ma'am," to everything. What else was I going to say? The reality was I was eating out of dumpsters behind restaurants. Prenatal care? My care was trying to find food that wasn't completely spoiled. The pregnancy was hard. I was sick a lot, tired all the time. But you keep going because stopping isn't an option. Stopping means you don't eat that day. So I kept doing what I did, which was mostly wandering, looking for cans, sometimes asking for spare change. I'd get these looks. A pregnant woman, belly getting bigger, dirty clothes. People would either look away real fast or get this pity face. The pity was worse. I preferred the looking away. I didn't know exactly how far along I was. The nurse in the van estimated. She said maybe 7 months. So I started counting in my head. I figured I had maybe 2 months to figure something out. I thought about shelters, but the ones I knew were always full, or they had rules I couldn't follow, or they scared me. Bad things happen in shelters too. Sometimes you're safer outside, in the open. The day it started, it was a Tuesday, I think. Yeah, a Tuesday. It was hot. LA hot, where the air feels thick and the pavement smelled like tar. I'd been walking since early morning, trying to find a place that was giving away food. My back had been aching all day, a deep, dull ache that was different from the usual ache. I figured it was from sleeping on the ground. I'd been having these tightenings in my belly for a couple days, but they didn't seem regular. They'd come, I'd breathe through them, and they'd go away. I thought it was just my body being tired. I was over on San Pedro Street near 5th. There's a little spot there where sometimes a church group sets up a table with sandwiches. I was hoping they'd be there. They weren't. The ache in my back was getting sharper, more focused. It would wrap around to the front of my belly and squeeze. I had to stop walking and lean against a wall. I remember looking at the graffiti, this bright blue tag, and just focusing on it. Breathing. A guy walking past me muttered something, called me a junkie, and kept going. That's what people assume when you're hunched over on Skid Row. They don't think pregnant woman in labor. They think another addict. That's when I knew. This wasn't just an ache. This was something else. The tightenings started coming faster, not like in the movies, where the water breaks in a big gush. For me, it was a slow leak. I felt this warm trickle down my leg. At first I thought I'd wet myself. It happens sometimes when you're pregnant and you cough or sneeze, but this was different. It kept coming, and the pain started to get a rhythm. It would build, peak, and then fade. Then a few minutes later, it would start again. Panic. That's the first real clear feeling I remember. Not fear, but full-blown panic, like a cold electricity in my veins. I needed to get off the street. I couldn't have the baby right there on the sidewalk. I just couldn't. I started walking, or more like hobbling, between these waves of pain. I needed somewhere private, somewhere enclosed. My mind went to the public bathrooms. There's a row of them, those single-person metal stalls near Los Angeles Street. They're infamous. Everyone knows they're the worst place you can go. They're not for using the toilet. They're for shooting up, for sleeping, for things you don't want to think about. But in that moment, it was the only inside place I could think of. It took me maybe 20 minutes to walk 2 blocks. Every contraction would stop me in my tracks. I'd grip a fence or a lamppost and just try to breathe, trying to be quiet, trying not to draw attention. When I finally got to the row of bathrooms, I had to wait. One of them was occupied. I stood there, sweating, shaking, listening to the sound of someone coughing violently from inside. Finally, the door cracked open and a man stumbled out. He didn't even look at me. I slipped inside before anyone else could get there. The smell hit me first. It's a smell you never forget. A mix of human waste, vomit, stale urine, and something chemical, like bleach, that failed its job. The floor was sticky. There was graffiti everywhere, and I don't mean outside. Inside, on the walls, the ceiling. The toilet was clogged, overflowing with something dark. Used needles were scattered in the corner like pickup sticks. There was trash, old clothes, feces smeared on the floor near the drain. It was the most disgusting place I had ever been, and it was where I was going to have my baby. I locked the door. The lock was flimsy, just a little slide bolt, but it felt like a huge achievement. I was in. I was safe, wasn't the word. Contained. I was contained. I took off my backpack, the only thing I owned in the world, and put it against the wall. Another contraction came, harder and longer than before. A sound escaped my throat, a low groan. I bit down on my lip to keep quiet. I didn't want anyone outside to hear and get curious. I knew I had to get down on the floor. I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to touch that floor, but I couldn't stand through this. I slowly lowered myself, using the wall for support. The stickiness of the floor touched my skin through my thin pants. I tried to find a spot that looked less contaminated, but it was all contaminated. I ended up sort of half sitting, half lying near the door, away from the worst of the mess by the toilet. Time got weird in there. It felt like hours, but it was probably less than one. The contractions took over everything. They became my whole world. There was no thinking, only surviving the next wave. In between, I'd have these moments of strange clarity. I'd look at the rust on the sink, the way a crack in the ceiling made a shape like a bird. Then the pain would come back and erase everything. I was wearing a big t-shirt and a pair of sweats. As the pain got worse, I needed something to bite down on. I didn't have anything. So I pulled the collar of my t-shirt up to my mouth and clenched my teeth on the fabric. It was thin and dirty, but it was something. I bit down on that shirt through every contraction after that. I didn't want to scream. A scream would bring people. A scream meant trouble. I could feel the baby moving down. It's a pressure you can't describe. It's immense. It feels like your body is being split open from the inside. My body started pushing on its own. I wasn't telling it to. It just decided it was time. I remember a thought flashing through my head. This is really happening. I am having a baby in a bathroom. The actual birth, it's a blur of pain and burning pressure. The head came first. I reached down. I don't even remember deciding to do it, and I could feel it, wet and slippery. With the next push, the shoulders came, and then suddenly there was this rush, and the whole body was out. I pulled him up onto my chest. He was so small, bluish at first, covered in white stuff and blood. He wasn't crying. For a second, my heart just stopped. This tiny, silent person. Then I rubbed his back, my hands shaking so bad I could barely control them. I patted him, cleared his mouth with my finger as best I could, and then he made a sound. A little gasp, then a weak cry. It was the most beautiful and terrifying sound I'd ever heard. He was alive. I had a son, but it wasn't over. He was still connected to me by the umbilical cord. I knew it needed to be cut. I didn't know how, but I knew it had to happen. I looked around the filthy bathroom for something, anything. Scissors? A knife? Nothing. Then I saw it. A piece of broken glass near the base of the toilet. It was from a shattered mirror or a bottle, a long, sharp shard. It was dirty, covered in God knows what. I had to put the baby down. That was the hardest part. I took off my sweatshirt. It was the cleanest thing I had, and made a little nest for him on the floor next to me, away from the needles. He was crying softly. I picked up the piece of glass. My hands were covered in blood. I wiped the glass on my pants as best I could. It didn't make it clean. Nothing in that room was clean. I had to find the cord. It was thick, pulsing. I didn't know where to cut. I just picked a spot a few inches from his belly and sawed at it with the sharp edge of the glass. It was tough, rubbery. It took a few tries, and I was so scared I was hurting him. Finally, it gave way. I tied a knot in the loose end on my side with a piece of string from my hoodie. I don't know if that was right, but I'd seen it in a movie once. I picked my son up again. He was shaking, not just the normal shivering of a newborn. This was different. Violent, jerking tremors. His little arms and legs were stiff, and he was making this high-pitched cry that sounded pained. His skin looked mottled. I knew what it was. I'd seen it before on the street. Neonatal abstinence syndrome. The baby's going through withdrawal because the mother used during pregnancy. I had. In the first few months before I knew I was pregnant, I was using whatever I could to get through the days. When I found out, I tried to stop. I couldn't completely. The sickness, the pain, the hopelessness. I'd use just a little to make it bearable. I thought a little wouldn't hurt. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Holding my convulsing son in that filthy bathroom, I felt a shame so deep it felt like a physical hole in my chest. I had done this to him. My choices, my failures, had poisoned him before he even took his first breath. I don't know how long we sat there. The afterbirth came out. I wrapped it in an old newspaper from my bag and pushed it into the corner. I cleaned the baby as best I could with some cleanish parts of my t-shirt and wrapped him in my hoodie. He kept shaking, his cries weak and strained. I held him close, trying to warm him, trying to soothe him, but nothing worked. He needed help, real medical help. I couldn't give it to him. I knew about the hospital, the big one nearby, the one everyone on the row ends up at eventually. I had to get him there, but I couldn't walk in with him. They'd ask questions. They'd call social services. They'd take him from me, and they'd be right to do it, but they might also arrest me. Neglect. Endangerment. I didn't know the law, but I knew I looked like a criminal, a drug addict who gave birth in a bathroom. They wouldn't see a person. They'd see a problem. I had a plan, a terrible, awful plan. I would leave him at the hospital. The safe haven law, I'd heard about it. You can leave a newborn at a hospital, no questions asked. But you have to leave him with a person. I couldn't do that. I couldn't hand him to a nurse and walk away. I just couldn't. So I thought of the next best thing. I would leave him at the hospital, where they would find him quickly. I found a cardboard box outside a dumpster, a shoebox. It was clean, relatively. I lined it with the last clean fabric I had, a beanie from my bag. I placed my son inside. He was still convulsing, his tiny body barely fitting. I kissed his forehead. His skin was so hot. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry I'm not better. I'm so sorry this is your start. Please be okay." It was the middle of the night now. The streets were quieter. I carried the shoebox the 2 blocks to the hospital's emergency entrance. The bright lights of the ambulance bay felt like stadium lights. I hid in the shadows across the street. I watched the automatic doors slide open and closed, nurses on smoke breaks, security guards milling about. I waited for a moment when no one was looking directly at the doors. A lull. Then I walked fast, not running, just a quick walk across the street. I placed the shoebox carefully on the ground, right in the path of the sliding doors, where the next person coming out would literally almost trip over it. I made sure the box was open a little so they'd see inside. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I heard the doors slide open behind me and I kept walking. I walked until I found a dark alley, and then I sank down behind a dumpster and finally cried. Not sobs, just silent tears that wouldn't stop. I cried for him. I cried for me. I cried for the impossibility of it all. I stayed away from that hospital for a week. Then I went back. I lurked around, asking no questions, just listening. I heard 2 nurses talking outside. One said to the other, "You hear about the NAS baby left in the box? Poor little fighter. Tough start, but he's stabilizing in the NICU." NAS, neonatal abstinence syndrome. The box. My boy. He was alive. He was fighting. He was in the NICU. That was 6 months ago. I think about him every day. I don't know where he is now. Probably in foster care. Maybe with a family. I hope with a family. A real family. With a clean house and a crib and someone who sings to him. I hope they tell him he was loved from the very beginning. Even if it was by a broken woman in a broken place, he was loved. He is loved. I'm still on the street. I got into a program, trying to get clean for real this time. It's hard. The memory of that bathroom, the feel of that glass in my hand, the sight of him shaking. It's what keeps me trying. I have to believe he survived that night for a reason. Maybe so I'd have a reason to survive too. I don't know if I'll ever see him again. I don't know if I should. What would I say? Sorry I brought you into the world on a floor covered in needles? Some stories don't have happy endings. Some just have endings, and you have to find a way to live after them. This is mine. I gave birth alone in a Skid Row bathroom, and my son, somewhere, is living the life I couldn't give him. That has to be enough. It's all I have.